for the infusion of positive energy into the lives of single Latter-day Saints everywhere. This is Joy in the Journey Radio.
And welcome back, peeps, to the wonderful, glorious, splendiferous, joyous episode of Joy in the Journey Radio. I am Lance, your host for Joy in the Journey Radio. Today is the 15th of September, 2021, and this is episode number 194, Live Without Regret. A couple of days ago, I returned from visiting with my mother and other family. As I described during the broadcast 3 weeks ago, I intended to make memories that would last a lifetime while I still could. I wasn't going to let the opportunity pass me by, and I wasn't going to risk not taking that opportunity only to learn it was my last opportunity. I refused to live with that. Now that the trip is behind me, I don't have any regrets. As I noted before leaving, it wasn't the best time to go. A new semester had just begun, and my schooling carried with it obligations and expectations, most notably the expectation to be present on campus. Yet I boldly defended my decision to any who resisted me, and I had no regret in so doing. Looking back on my decision and its outcome, I still have no regrets. But I also have something else, something that I didn't anticipate. Looking back on my trip and my lack of regret for it got me thinking, why can't it be that way for everything in my life? Why can't I simply decide to live without regret? I don't regret my trip because from the start I saw it for what it is. I don't know the future, but I know that if that opportunity to see my mother would be the last to make memories while she could still recognize me and I didn't take it, I would regret it for the rest of my life. I refused to live with that regret, and so I embraced my travel with the end in mind. And that's the key. Stephen Covey's first habit of highly effective people is to begin with the end in mind. That speaks to the need to be self-aware. After all, you can't begin with the end you aren't aware of. That's more than just awareness. You want a life without regret. It's an awareness of the choices you can make today that promote or prevent that end. I didn't know and still don't know whether the opportunity I just took is the last to be with my mother while she still recognizes me. But I do know the potential had to become such, and I refused to tolerate that possibility. It's really not any more complicated than that. Gain an awareness of yourself and the potential your choices have to lead you towards or away from the end you want, and then act accordingly. That's not just for living life without regret. That's for any end you may want in life. Adopting an end in which your life has no regret is just a good place to start. It will give you courage to go farther and pursue your fullest potential, a life without regret, the life that is your best life. The path that leads you there will, of course, have challenges. I faced resistance before making my journey to see my mother. My advisor expressed disapproval with my decision to travel home, but I held firm and shared my rationale for my decision. He understood, and we made plans for what would happen after my return. I don't think everyone will have that experience. Sometimes things won't work out. Sometimes you'll stand your ground, and your challenges will overcome you. But you can always hold your head high, knowing you chose to live your life without regret. I've made plenty of choices that brought regret into my life. I've known regret in both the short and long term. And now I know it doesn't have to be that way. I can live without regret. So can you. You can live without regret if you will gain the awareness you need of yourself and your choices to know the end you want, and then make those choices that will lead you to that end. That decision won't remove the regret you already have from past choices. Only Christ and his atonement can do that. But you can decide to embrace the atonement, just as you can decide that from this moment forward, you will live without regret. So live without regret. Life is too beautiful and time too precious. Don't squander them with choices that will bring regret in any amount. Know yourself, know what you want, and go after it. And every day you don't have it, keep going after it. Don't apologize, don't make excuses, and don't delay any longer. Start living your life without regret today. You'll savor the wonder of living more fully, and that will bring you more joy in your journey. Back in a moment.
Joy in the Journey Radio.
And welcome back, peeps, from that break. We are here back in the JJ Zone for another blender for this episode of Joy in the Journey Radio. And today we're talking about living without regret. No regrets, people. No regrets. Too many of us, Latter-day Saint singles, are just living life without any sense of direction or purpose. And so we're just kind of basically just bobbing with the waves of life and letting the currents take us wherever they will. And that right there is a recipe for life without regret. You're squandering time. You're squandering life. Don't squander that, peeps. Like I say in the monologue, life is too beautiful. Don't squander it. Figure out what you want and then go after it. Now, we talk here on the program about all sorts of different ways to go after what we want, because some things are best pursued directly, and other things, like marriage, is best pursued indirectly. So you got to know what it is you're going after. And it's like I said in the monologue, start with Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Classic book from 1989, 88, something like the end of the 80s is when he wrote it. And it's an absolute classic. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend getting yourself a copy and reading it. If you want to, borrow from the library or something like that, okay, fine. But you really do need to have a copy of this book in your library. It is that classic. So if you haven't read it, I highly recommend going and read it. It'll give you a lot to think about, and it's one of those things that's transformational for a lot of people. So I highly recommend picking up a copy and giving it a read. The first of Stephen Covey's habits of highly effective people. Habit number 1 is begin with the end in mind. And that, I think, is a key element to living life without regret. You begin with the end in mind. You know what it is you want, and then you go after it. The way this actually works and plays out in the real world, though, is you've got to be aware of yourself. You got to be good with you on the inside, right? You got to know yourself. You've got to be aware of yourself. You've got to be aware of who you are and what you're all about, because that's going to set you up for the choices that you need to make to get from where you are, how you are, and then to go forward and go after what it is you really want. Begin with the end in mind. How do you identify the choices that you need to make to get to where you want to go? Well, let me ask another question in response to that question. How are you possibly going to know the choices that you need to make to get where you want to go if you don't know where you are? And how are you going to know where you are if you don't know what you are, if you don't know who you are? You got to be good with you first. That's the first step. You got to be self-aware. You've got to be cognizant of who you are and what you're all about. And so many of us, we haven't done the work. We haven't dug deep enough to reveal to ourselves who it is we are and what it is we're all about. So if that describes you, I have a simple little exercise that'll really help out with this. It's something that helped me, years ago when I went through this sort of, it's called transformation. What you do is you just essentially ask a series of why questions. You be like the annoying little kid, are we there yet? No. Why? Because we're not there yet. Why? Because we still got more miles to go. Why? Because, it just keeps going on and on. It just keeps asking why. Well, that's what you need to do with yourself. You need to ask yourself why. So take for example, take something that you want in your life. Okay, say something that a lot of LDS singles want in their life. They want to be married. Okay, so let's just take that example. I want to be married. Why? Because I'm tired of being alone. Why? Because I'm not supposed to be alone. Why? Because my culture tells me I'm not supposed to be alone. Why? Because the gospel plan is for men and women to come together and to be married and to have families. Why? Because that's part of Heavenly Father's plan for his children. Why? Well, see, you keep going with this, right? And eventually you get to a point where it's just like, you get down to like naked truth. So looking at the example that I just gave you, let's go back over it and go back to a few steps. Because really, what you want to make sure you do, see, we got to a point where it's like, okay, this isn't very useful because we got down to the gospel truth, but we're still stuck with the same position where we were before. It's like we're not better off than we were before. We don't know anything more than we knew before. So the way you avoid that is by personalizing it. So let's back up the chain a little bit and let's talk a little bit about some of the things that need to happen. So you just personalize this. So what we're looking at here essentially is when you ask the question why to, let's see, we go back to where we said, why do you want to be married? Right? And what was the answer we gave? I'm asking you a question. I want you to answer it. I know I can't really hear you, but I'm trying to make this more interactive. I'm trying something new, right? Just like, you notice the lighting is different. I'm trying to fix the problems I've been having with the green screen where I just kind of, parts of me just kind of ghost out. It seems to be working so far, but the lighting just looks different. So, if you notice the difference with the lighting, that's the reason why. It's because I'm trying to fix the problem I had with the green screen. So I'm trying different things out. So, what was the thing that we looked at a little while ago with that string of why questions? Why do you want to be married? Well, because I'm tired of being alone. Why are you tired of being alone? And it says, because my culture tells me. Now, that actually is true. Okay, traditionally, Latter-day Saint culture tells single Latter-day Saints, hey, if you want to be accepted, you need to have a spouse, you need to have children. You need to be married with kids. That's how you're accepted within the culture. And if you don't have that, then yeah, you're not really one of us. That's the traditional culture. Now, as we've talked about here on the program, I've seen signs that the brethren recognize this and they're trying to move the culture towards something that's centered in Christ, towards something that's centered in making and keeping sacred covenants with our Savior. Because that's something everyone can do, regardless of your individual circumstances, the life situation that you're in. Everyone can make and keep covenants with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. That's something everyone can do. And so adopting this as the center of our culture, because that's where the marker of belonging for any culture comes from. It comes from what the culture is centered around. So adopting Christ as the center of our culture will really go to alleviate a lot of the challenges that LDS singles have traditionally faced. And, if you're a longtime audience member, this is old hat to you. You know all this. Because we've talked about this before. So, to go back and say that I want to be married because of my culture, okay, that's true. But what we want to do is personalize it. Okay? Why do you want to be married? Why do you want to be married? Now, there's two ways you could answer that question that I could see, and both of them are equally personalized to the individual. One possible answer would be to say, because I want to have sex, and I'm not going to be accepted within my culture if I have sex outside of marriage. So I want to be married so I can have sex. That's a legitimate answer. It's personalized. And see, now you can keep asking why and start to explore more of who you are and where you're at. Another possible answer that's just as legitimate is to say, because I want to be accepted in my culture. I want to feel like I'm part of the group. As we just got done discussing, you've got this traditional culture that is centered around being married with kids. So if you want to belong, you got to be married with kids. So there's actually two very powerful forces going on that a lot of LDS singles they're just not aware of what's going on. And so, by asking this string of why questions and personalizing it, you can come to understand more of who you are and where you're at. And that will help you to see more of choices that you can make to get you to the end of where you want to go. We're coming to a break. Let me go ahead and take that break now. When we come back from the break, I want to dive more into the topic of living without regret, because once you know who you are and what you're all about, you get good with you on the inside, then the next step becomes, okay, how are we going to identify the choices that we need to make to get us to the end that we want to go to? We're going to examine that question when we come back from the break. See you there on the other side.
Joy in the Journey Radio.
And welcome back, peeps. Another wonderful, splendid for this Joyce episode. We are here from the break, and you gotta love Joe Jackson. If you don't know Joe Jackson, your musical education is seriously deficient, and you need to get that corrected today. So the way to do that, just go onto YouTube and look for some Joe Jackson videos, and get absorbed in his music. He's classic, right? But what he was singing over the break, absolutely true, absolutely pertinent to our discussion today about living life without regret. You can't get what you want till you know what you want. You got to know what you want first before you can get it. It's kind of makes sense. But, a lot of us, like I was saying at the beginning of the program, a lot of us are just kind of bobbing around, letting the currents of life take us where they will. Sorry, just every once in a while, I just feel like breaking out into song like life's a musical. So yeah, we're just letting the waves take us where they will. That's no way to live life. That's a recipe for living life with regret, because you're gonna come to be old and looking back on your whole life, decades of living, and you realize you weren't really living. You were just existing. You were just getting through each moment from one to the next. You didn't really live life. You didn't really savor it. Life is too beautiful. Time is too precious, peeps. Let's live life without regret. Now, the question is, how do we do that? How do we do that? That's the question that we're talking about today on Join the Journey Radio. Before the break, we were talking about how it's important to know yourself. I think that's where everyone needs to start. Get good with you on the inside. Get good with who you are. Become aware of who you are and what you're all about, and be good with it. Okay? That's the first part. Okay? So I got this part where I know who I am. I'm good with me. That's it. The next part is begin with the end in mind. Oh, hey, check that out. My hand was like disappearing or something. Extended into another dimension. Okay, we're going to get sidelined here. Let's get back on track. So, know who you are, and then know what you want, and then you can bring them together. But you can't bring them together if you don't know the two pieces to bring together. That's just the way it works. So, we talked before the break about the knowing yourself part. It turns out that the same methodology for getting to know yourself better, asking that endless string of why questions, kind of works really good for knowing what you want. So let me give you an example. let's say, we were going through the same example that we were before. We're like talking about, so, why do you want to be married? Or we don't even have to go that far. Let's just say what you think you really want is a significant other, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a spouse. It could be like someone that you're dating exclusively. Let's say that. And so you're asking this endless string of why questions. And let's say the core naked truth that comes out of that endless string of why questions is because you're lonely and you don't want to be lonely. Well, when you step back and you think about, okay, how do you address loneliness? You realize having a significant other is not the only way to address loneliness. There are other ways that you can address loneliness. And perhaps one of those ways may actually be better for you to pursue now because, like I was saying before, it's like marriage is one of those things that's best pursued indirectly. Well, I would extend that to every part of the dating journey, that a lot of what we do in the dating journey to progress through is actually better pursued indirectly rather than directly. Now, I know some of you are going to be like scratching your head and be like, that didn't make any sense. I don't know if you could hear that. Maybe you can you not? But yeah, can you hear that? Sometimes I have to really beat stuff to get it through into my head. So if you're like me, hey, I feel you, brother or sister, because I can't see you, so I don't know your gender. So yeah, we need to have this understanding, right? That if you want to progress in the dating journey, you got to have an agreement. We've talked about this before. Fundamentals of the dating journey. Well, a lot of ways to pursue the agreement is by becoming more agreeable, but part of becoming more agreeable is pursuing it indirectly, really. You think about it. Because we all know those people who are just like so obsessed with, having that next step in their dating journey that they irradiate this energy. They're broadcasting this energy that's just like, man, I don't know what is it, man? It's just not attractive. And so this is why I'm saying this is the indirect part, right? Because you get good with you on the inside and you make changes in you so you become more agreeable. And then in that process, you actually radiate a different type of energy. You're broadcasting something different that's actually more attractive. And so then it becomes easier in that one moment where you need to be direct and secure the agreement. It's best, some things are just better pursued indirectly. So, maybe if, you have, like I said, that issue with loneliness and you're trying to get a significant other to solve the problem of loneliness, we'll realize maybe the better approach would be to find some other way to deal with the loneliness. Because then you're going to be broadcasting something very different to the people around you. And that's going to influence the choices they make respecting you. So, yeah, know what you want and be really good with that. And, like I was saying before the break, we were talking about Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. You got to know what the end is in order to begin with it, right? You got to know what it is. You got to be good with it. You got to be good with you. And you got to kind of see how, those two kind of match up. How are you going to get that to match up? You got to have some self-awareness skills here to understand how everything's going to come together. But then I think another key element to understanding how to bring those two together is going back to, what was it? It seems like it was 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a little long. There was a conference talk that President Oaks gave, a general conference, and it was basically along the same lines of begin with the end in mind. And I think it was entitled, Where Will This Lead? Or Where Will It Lead? Something like that. And essentially, he was saying that this is a question that we should be asking ourselves when we're making choices in life. Ask ourselves, well, where's this going to take me? What direction is this going to point me in? Is that somewhere where I really want to go? And if the answer is no, don't make the choice. But Again, too often we're living life on autopilot. Too often we're just playing out habits. We're going from one moment to the next. We're not really living life. We're not really living in the moment. And again, if you don't have the self-awareness, it's going to be really hard to pull yourself out of yourself so that you can see yourself playing the habit that you've got ingrained in you. And, living life on autopilot, it's going to be hard for you to see yourself more objectively as someone else might see you. And that's just going to come back to obstruct you. It's really going to get in your way, because if you can't see yourself playing out that habit, if you can't see yourself living on autopilot, it's going to be harder to break out of that habit, because you got to realize what's going on before you can tackle it. So, asking yourself this question of where will this lead is an exercise that helps you identify more with the self-awareness that you need to live life without regret. So ask yourself, where is this going to take me? Where is this going to lead me? I don't know where this is going to take me. Well, if you don't know where it's going to take you, then you got two options. You can either, not go down that path and just assume that it's going to take you somewhere you don't want to go and just find something else to do. Or you can say, I don't know where it's going to go, but let's find out. And so you just take a step out. You start marching in that direction. And then oftentimes as you start moving in a direction, you start figuring out, okay, I can see where this is going to take me. And then you can make a decision. Is this where I want to go? If yes, then keep doing it. If no, then stop doing it and find something else to do. It's really not very complicated, but it requires you to break out of this routine living that a lot of us are in, which again, I don't want to be like misinterpreted as being overly critical of people. We got to understand this is normal. I mean, living life on autopilot is absolutely normal, because all of us have been biologically programmed up here in our heads to have a habit and to operate out of habit. That's our biological hardwiring. So when people are doing that, they're just being normal. So, I hope that everyone understands I'm not being overly critical of people who are just playing out what they've been programmed to play out. It's just being normal. Okay. At the same time, also want people to understand, if all you do is just play out your biological programming, which you inherit from evolutionary biology, then you're not going to have the maximum amount of joy you could have. You're not going to relish your life. You're not going to thrive. You're not going to have the maximum amount of joy in your journey. And there's a whole lot of joy you're leaving there on the table, because you can't get that living on autopilot. You got to break out of that. And, an important step to breaking out of that is gaining that self-awareness, gaining the self-awareness skills that you need to step outside yourself, see yourself more objectively, like you're on the outside looking in, see yourself more as other people see you, and gain that skill and that ability. And that comes with practice. That comes with time. It doesn't just, boom, come at an instant. It's not like the Matrix where you can just, download stuff into your head. Boom, okay, suddenly I know how to fly a helicopter. It's not like that, okay? It takes practice. It takes skill. It takes dedication and time. And you have to do the work. You got to apply yourself. You got to do the work. But if you do the work and you do it consistently and you do it for long enough, eventually you learn the skill. You gain a greater sense of self-awareness, and you can actually see more of who you really are, what you really want, and then you can bring those things together more easily. But, like I said, a lot of people just don't have those self-awareness skills. They're just being normal. But if you want to thrive, you want a maximum amount of journey in your life, then you got to break out of that. We're overdue for a break. Let's go ahead and take that break now. When we come back from the break, we're going to wrap up the program with some more thoughts I have about this topic of living life without regret. See you there on the other side.
Joy Joy in the Journey Radio.
And welcome back, Pete, from that break. We are here in the JJ Zone, Joy in the Journey Radio. Today, talking about living life without regret. You know, I want to share with you a personal experience that I had with my recent trip. And I want to do that to illustrate to you the final piece of the puzzle that you need in order to live life without regret. You know, now those of you who've been listening to the program know 3 weeks ago, I said, yeah, you know, I see this opportunity. My mother, she had a birthday coming up. She's been suffering from dementia. So there's that. You know, there's this, it's just a matter of time before we get to a point where she's just not going to recognize me. She's not going to know who I am. And, you know, I know that day's coming. I didn't know, you know, how close that day, you know, was or is. I mean, it's not, because it's not here yet. So, you know, before I was making the trip, I was like, you know, because I was, of course, hearing progress reports from my father telling me how my mother's doing, and I could, you know, she's getting worse. And so I'm just like, this may be the last opportunity I have to visit with my mother while she can still recognize me. Because, you know, by the time I graduate here with my PhD degree, hopefully in a couple of years from now, you know, I may, you know, find that my mother can't recognize me. So what if this is my last opportunity to be with my mother and make memories with her while she can still recognize me? What if this is my last opportunity and I don't take it? I will regret that for the rest of my life. And so I decided I'm not living with that. See, a lot of the quality of the life that we have is a direct result of what we're willing to tolerate. You have what you have in your life because you're willing to tolerate it. You don't have in your life the things you say you want, but you don't have them. Those things you don't have, it's because you tolerate not having them. It's really no more complicated than that. And when you change your mindset and say, I'm not going to tolerate that, I'm going to take the bar and raise it up. Okay. The standard of what I consider to be acceptable in my life, got to raise that bar, got to put it up. We got to do more and be more. And when you decide that you're not going to tolerate anything less, that's when your life turns around. That's when you start seeing things change in your life. When you start saying, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to take that. And that's a key final element, I believe, to living life without regret. You know yourself, you know what you want, you can bring them together, and you tolerate nothing less than those two being together. That last part is key. You tolerate nothing less than everything coming together for you. And, you know, you might tolerate, say, not having it today, because a lot of times patience is required to get what we want. But you're not going to tolerate deviating from the path that gets you there. You're not going to tolerate not making progress today and moving closer to that thing that you want. You're not going to tolerate that. And that's the attitude I had and I took with this trip. I'm not going to tolerate, you know, the idea that, you know, this could be the last opportunity to be with my mother. And I don't want to miss that. So I made the trip. I intentionally did not tell her about it. I just said, hey, let's keep this a secret, because I wanted to see if she could still recognize me. It was a test. How was it going to be a test if she knew that I was coming? See? So I had to put it a surprise just so I could test her. And I never forget, you know, they're in the house, you know, she's there in the house and she's coming in, and I come around the corner and I say, hello, mother. And she sees me, and you could see like the whole whiteness in her face, this, you know, total look of surprise colored her countenance. But there was a twinkle in her eye that told me she recognized me and she cried out, "My boy!" And then I knew that she knew who I was. And, we stood there and hugged for a long time. And it was a really tender moment. Not only because of, everything I just got done describing. I mean, that alone is enough to make it a tender moment. But the spot where we were standing, where we were giving each other that embrace. This is the first time I'd seen my mother in 2 years. That same spot where we were standing is the same spot where years ago my mother was consoling me with a long hug on the day my cat died. That broke my heart. I was inconsolate, like you could not believe. I almost don't believe how much I was crying. And it was that same spot of, carpet, because we were like, I was about to say ground, but we're actually inside the house. It's carpeted. So it's like the same spot of carpet where, my mother embraced me and consoled me. And so now here I am. It's come full circle. Now here I am, to give my mother a long hug and console her in the final days of her demise by dementia, amongst other, ailments that she has, both physical and mental. She's wasting away. And it's really sad to see, but it was good to be there in that moment. And so it's like, I have no regrets, I have no regrets about that. I had no regrets, before the trip. I had no regrets in that moment. And, traveling back here was kind of a nightmare for me because my flight got canceled. So I'm looking here and saying, okay, when can I get back? And all the planes are full. And because, everyone's coming out of lockdown, right? It's just like everyone's traveling because they want to get out. And so all the planes are full. And so I just had to take what I could get. Ended up staying another half week. So, I used that time to my advantage. Again, no regrets, and I come back and I have no regrets. I kept my instructors, my advisor aware of what was going on. I try to be transparent throughout this and try to say, hey, yeah, this is what's going on. My advisor, speaking of challenges you may have to living life without regret. Yeah, he put up a stink about it. But when I said, look, this is the day I'm leaving. This is the day I plan to come home. This is why I'm doing this. And he was understanding. I put my foot down and said, I'm not going to live with regret. I'm not going to live with the possibility that I'm going to regret something. So that's not happening. And he was accepting of that. Now, of course, one of the things I have to deal with, the consequence of that decision, is I've got a whole lot more work that I have to do for this semester. So, but hey, I'm okay with that. I don't feel anything negative about that. I willingly accept that because I understand what it was I was going after. I knew what I wanted. I knew why I wanted it. I knew who I was. I brought those two together and I said, I'm not going to tolerate anything less. And so I live life without regret. And, thinking about that, it just got me thinking. It's like, well, why can't it be that way with everything? And the answer is it can be. It can be that way for everything in life. It can be that way. If you have that self-awareness to know who you are, to know, what it is that you want and why you want it, you see the path to bring those two together, and then don't accept anything less. Don't accept anything other than continual progress toward bringing those two together. Who you are and what you want, bringing it together. Don't tolerate anything less. So, that's what I want to leave you with on the program today. That, no excuses. You have agency. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Agency is, in my opinion, the second most unappreciated gift from our Heavenly Father. It really is. And the reason why is because so many of us have this gift of agency and we don't use it to our advantage. We don't use it to leverage the maximum amount of joy that we can get in the moment, regardless of our circumstances. We have that power within us. As the Lord described in Dr. Covey, for the power is in them. There's power in you. You have agency. That means there's power in you. You can make choices. So make choices. Make choices that will get you where you want to go. Ask yourself, where's this going to take me? If I make this choice, where will it end? And, if it's going to take you somewhere where you don't want to go, make a different choice. Find a different choice that will get you where you want to go. And make that choice. Start living life consciously. Start living in the moment. Break out of this, routine living that a lot of us are in. The routine of just going through life and going through the motions. Don't let the waves carry you where they will. You chart a course and you sail to where you want to go. No excuses, no apologies, no delays. Get on it now. And doing that, you will find more joy to be had in your journey. You'll find doors opening up to you that you couldn't even imagine. But it's not going to happen until you exercise the power in you that comes with your agency. So make that choice today. Live your life today without regrets. No regrets, no excuses, no apologies, no delays. And when you take that attitude, you get no regrets. That's all the time we have for Join the Journey Radio. I want to thank everyone for listening or watching, as the case may be. And, if something I've done is helpful for you, and I hope that it has been, I hope I'm able to offer you something that's helpful. And if something I have offered is helpful, then I invite you to help somebody else. Pay it forward. Help somebody else in your life and in your world. Let's take the light and the goodness that we have inside each of us and let's let it shine. Let's bring it out. Let's help other people along the way, because Lord knows, as dark and evil as, the world is becoming, we need all the light and goodness we can muster. So let's bring that out. And don't forget to come back next week for another wonderful, splendiferous, joyous episode of Join the Journey Radio. So until next time, this is your host reminding you there is joy to be had all along your journey. So take that joy and journey on.